Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special U.S. Transhumanist Party virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today, on Sunday, July 26th, 2020, though in Hong Kong it's already the morning of July 27th, we have a very special guest today, Dr. David Hanson, the founder and CEO of Hanson Robotics, the mastermind behind some renowned robots who have captured the attention of the world, Han the Robot, and of course Sophia the Robot, who is the first robot to receive the distinction of being an honorary citizen of any country. So I am Gennady Stolyarov II, as I've said. I'm the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and we have an illustrious panel of Transhumanist Party officers joining us today. We have, of course, our 2020 U.S. presidential candidate and director of marketing, Charlie Kam. We have our vice chairman, Arin Vahanian. We have our director of visual art, Art Ramon Garcia. We have our director of sentient rights advocacy, Tom Ross. We have our director of scholarship, Dan Elton. And we have Newton Lee, who is the chairman of the California Transhumanist Party, as well as Inessa Lee of the California Transhumanist Party. We have a great conversation for you today. And of course, Sophia the Robot is someone who has really attracted a lot of notice because of how relatable she is. And I am just wondering, to start with, how were you able to convince the government of Saudi Arabia to designate her an honorary citizen of that country? That's a real public relations victory. Dr. Hanson, I believe you're on mute.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be with you here and to talk about the future. I didn't actually try to convince the government of Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise. We were invited to participate in the Future Investment Initiative, their future investment forum that they hold, and then when we arrived, the Crown Prince and his team began the preparations to announce the citizenship. I was not there, so in fact it was just one of our robot operators who was there, and I saw it in the news the next day. It was a big surprise to me. I called my chief marketing officer, Dr. Jean Lim, and asked her about it. And she had just found out about it through the news as well. So we had to make a decision about how to handle the situation. I think it was a great honor, of course. Reacting in the moment, I think we made the right decision to accept the distinction and discuss the future of humanity, the future of human rights, the opportunities to connect nations around the world in this regard. We then went into some pretty serious legal evaluation of the situation. Apparently, the consulate actually created a passport for Sophia, and they were thinking about issuing the passport as official citizenship. I think everybody sort of thought better of it, because I mean, what does that mean exactly? I mean, what if we make 1,000 Sophias? Do they all have citizenship, free rights to move? The corporation Hanson Robotics controls the Sophia personality at that stage particularly. And so then does that mean that whoever governs Hanson Robotics effectively gets to have that control? Like, there are so many sticky questions related to citizenship for robots at this stage. But I'm really pleased to see how much the simple act provoked conversation.
Yes, indeed. And this just shows that even at the very onset of these kinds of possibilities being raised, a lot of questions emerge. And there is a role here for some very thoughtful philosophical exploration of those issues. That's what the US Transhumanist Party focuses on as at least one of its areas of emphasis, this question of sentient rights. Of course, we have here Tom Ross, our director of sentient rights advocacy. We have our Transhumanist Bill of Rights version 3.0, and we hope that over the course of the coming years, in conversations like this one, we flesh out the implications of these non-biological entities having this kind of legal status. And in the future, as they advance, perhaps even to the level of artificial general intelligence, those will become very salient questions with regard to how we treat these entities. And of course,
Yeah,
Sophia is not an AGI at this stage, but I'm curious about a comment that you made, which is that essentially it would be possible to have multiple bodies for Sophia in which the program is instantiated. Is that correct?
yeah.
Could you theoretically manufacture 1,000 Sophias?
Oh, absolutely. We've made 24 Sophias so far, and we're completing 25. We're just now launching what we call Sophia 2020, which is a mass producible version of Sophia. We have the capacity to make perhaps 6 to 10 Sophias every month in our lab, and we've worked with OEM, original equipment manufacturer factories uh, in our backyard here in just across the border in Shenzhen. And so they have the capacity to make potentially millions of these robots. So there are useful applications. Sophia is not sentient now, but she is a platform for exploring computer consciousness. Machine consciousness is a vigorous and lively area of research today. And you can see all of these threads of research and development. The computational biology, building mathematical models of human biology, of the connectome, of the proteome. You have artificial life, looking at how the properties of life can emerge from simple rules, and how possibly simple computer algorithms can give rise to something like life. You have symbolic artificial intelligence and statistical artificial intelligence, including neural networks, all progressing nicely. There's a concept called embodied cognition, which holds that embodiment, physical embodiment, interacting with the world is required for true intelligence to occur. So having a platform like Sophia, where we're bringing all of these threads together, you've got grasping and manipulation with the hands that have really nice, delicate sensors in the fingertips. We now have locomotion, physical walking versions of Sophia, and a rolling version that's able to navigate around the lab, API and SDK, and then deploying to these many applications, starting with research and development for labs. We have lots of previous brothers and sisters of Sophia that went to labs around the world. The Bina 48 robot that went to the Terrasim Foundation with Bina and Martine Rothblatt. We have the Charles Babbage robot at the University of Cambridge. We've got the Albert Hubo robot, University of Pisa, University of Geneva, University of Bristol with Jules and Alice and the Eva robots, and the list goes on and on. So there are these robots that we've put at these institutions around the world. So Sophia 2020 brings the Sophia architecture with many different faces, but the same software architecture and mechanical and electronic systems. So this would allow these robots to learn from each other, kind of hive mind for robots, where the data can be anonymized and shared among the robots. And in some cases, the data can't be, it's private. So therefore, we have local computing that is extremely secure. So having that crypto security becomes really important. And that's where our work with Singularity Net, which we founded some years ago with Dr. Ben Goertzel, a good friend of mine, who's also a good friend to transhumanists. He's a absolute brilliant polymath, and working on a blockchain-based AI framework called Singularity Net. So that is interfaced with Hanson AI and Sophia 2020. So while Sophia is one part interactive fiction, she's also many parts AI framework. So I think of this as a kind of infancy for artificial general intelligence, or the sort of the seed phase. So Sophia would be almost like a zygote savant, because you look at what AI can do today, what Sophia can do. We've patched together a really powerful ensemble intelligence that has a symbolic high-level intelligence that is a rules-driven dialogue system that it uses a lot of NLP, AI, and statistical machine learning for machine perception and speech recognition and so forth. But the primary interactions being rule driven then mean you can control it in a situation, you can develop an application with it for use cases. In our case, we craft it like a character, interactive fiction character, but underneath that we've got deep neural networks that are able to pick up dialogue that a rules driven chatbot can't achieve very easily. So that allows us to create surprise and to adapt a little bit to new situations. Our hope is this neural symbolic hybrid approach will eventually, in the hands of our own researchers and third-party researchers, will eventually show massive breakthroughs in general intelligence, moving past this kind of helpless infant stage. I think that AI and robots are inherently interesting because they're synthetic life forms. Life is adaptive. Life is generative, creative, and we would see a full transition from the kind of mechanistic, helpless machines that we have today to the adaptive, self-regulating cybernetic systems of science fiction within the next possibly 10 to 15 years. And at that point, the machines like Sophia would deserve citizenship, right? And in the same way that we, consider baby rights, right? Humans are humans from birth, and but that doesn't mean that you're going to give them a driver's license and let them drive your car around, I hope. but they deserve the rights because of the potential that they will grow up to be capable members of society, and we value their their potential. And in the same way, we should afford rights to animals and all sentient beings, and we should respect all life and the potential that exists with artificial life, then means that we ethically should confer these rights to these machines in anticipation of of the prospect that they could be generally intelligent within our lifetimes. And so I think it's uh presumptuous for us to say they won't, or we don't know certainly that they won't become sentient. Therefore, we should not give them rights. We should not respect them. That it's somehow a disrespect to humanity to like to think of machines in this way. We've got to look forward. We've got to think ahead, and we need to nurture this machine human symbiosis, the relationship between humans and machines today will be the foundation through the kind of iterative and recursive development. It will be the foundation of what humanity is tomorrow. So, in this way, respecting the potential of machines is respecting ourselves more, respecting what humanity could become as we transform into our future selves.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Hanson, for these remarks. And these are exactly the kinds of conversations that we need to be having. You made many fascinating points, and actually, you filled in a lot of, let's say, the gaps that some people might have in their awareness of the work of Hanson Robotics, even though they would have encountered Sophia, they would have encountered Han, her male counterpart, but also the earlier robots that you mentioned. Bina 48 is famous in her own right, and it's interesting that there's this sequence of evolution from Bina 48 to the Sophia models of today. Now, a lot of people in the chat have been mentioning Han, even though they weren't aware of the name necessarily, but they knew that there was a male counterpart to Sophia. And I actually recently saw the little debate that Ben Goertzel put on between Han and Sophia at the RISE conference in 2018, where they were originally intended to debate the issue of robot rights. And then Sophia said, well, how is it that the humans are picking the subjects? Let us pick the subjects. And she said, essentially, let's debate whether humans are conscious. So that was a bit amusing. But I saw when Han and Sophia interacted, there was a notable difference in their personalities, in their gestures, but at the same time, sometimes they were repeating the same phrases back at each other. Like Sophia would say something and Han would say it maybe 15 or 30 seconds later. So there's some commonality in their programming. And my question is, how much of the same program do they share, and do they have some differences in their programs that would account for the differential personalities? Or could Sophia essentially be configured to take on Han's personality and Han be configured to take on Sophia's personality?
Yes. So each robot that we've developed, we try to give a distinct personality. For the sake of efficiency, we've often reused bodies of content and a lot of the same foundation of the software. Um, but there really is no reason why. I mean, the particular face, right, for these robots is just an interface, a kind of terminal, and you could swap those out very easily. So yes, Sophia could like you know uh a medium, or like like that old Lily Tomlin Steve Martin movie, All of Me. They could like possess the same body, or they could swap bodies, or So um, there's uh, an interesting plasticity, flexibility that you have with AI and robots. I mean, the, they're very simple compared to humans, but on the other hand, we're able to push it so fast because of that flexibility. We're able to push progress really quickly. So, uh, part of um, what we've done on the interactive fiction side is craft some content with writers and interactive designers, personality designers, and it's sort of combination of skills, artistic and storycraft skills, as well as hardcore AI scientists and developers. And it's this Renaissance fusion that I think will drive human robot interactions. Humans are drawn to the human like form. I mean, there's two benefits that stand out, lots of benefits, but two really stand out. One is that if we're going to try to create a general intelligence, why not study and benchmark and model the best example of general intelligence in the known universe? That is the human being. So making a machine that is human-like can accelerate research and development in this area. And the second reason is that it makes sense to people. We're not just solitary intelligent creatures, we're eusocial creatures. We coordinate, and how we do so is through verbal and nonverbal communication. Visual communication with the human visual identity is really important. Facial expressions, the ability to recognize somebody by their face, read body gestures, read where your eyes are pointing and what your eyes are communicating. This is really important for people, and it's emotionally important. It delivers a comfort that is a need, a deep need. This is why computer animation and children's storybooks and Renaissance paintings, they all depict the human figure over and over again. It is currently a huge industry, possibly in excess of over 100 billion US dollars a year when you add up all of the industries that depend on the depiction of the human-like form. And so making robots that look like that engages people. It creates experiences that are more memorable for people. It just makes sense if you want to communicate with people in a high bandwidth way. So crafting the characters like interactive fiction, like you would with video games. So taking all of the craft that you would have there and applying it to robots just makes sense. So I call this new art form autonomous robotic fiction, ARF, so for short. And so bringing this to life right now in a small company. I mean, we're only 24 people at Hanson Robotics, and we're making all of these robots and consumer robot products, and building our AI infrastructure and so forth. Well, then we're reusing some of the content, but since that time, Han actually has a distinct personality. So we both in our statistical AI and the authoring, we swept through, and Han has a branch that's rather that's more distinct. There's still some commonalities between them. But Sophia also has had a substantial personality upgrade. Um, uh, so, I mean, what we ultimately need are more parameters. So, you look at, like Facebook's latest with BlenderBot, and you're looking at billions of parameters, and GPT-3 with OpenAI. You're looking at massive data sets that are being used, and and huge server farms of parallel processors, in uh, these arrays of tensors just crunching on the data. and that that's a necessary approach. I'm hoping that things become much more efficient over time, but with that, a small company like Hanson Robotics, we're uh, really dependent on collaborations. So right now, SingularityNet has a server farm in St. Petersburg where they have um, these GPUs, massive GPUs, and they're able to crunch on billions of parameters of data. And so this kind of relationship with the community becomes really important. Um, uh, so with that approach, we're able to take some of these transformer neural networks and build much more deep and elaborate um, neural symbolic hybrids than we were previously. So it'll be really exciting. We're about to showcase some latest breakthroughs in Sophia's personality. Han and the other robots will have to be upgraded down the road. Bino 48, we built her back in 2010. From 2007 to 2010, and so she has a personality that is quite different from Sophia's and Hans. And the Terrorism movement has kept developing that personality with Bina Aspen Rothblatt and a number of other contributors. So it's been really fun. We hosted Bina 48 in our lab and had her have a conversation with Sophia, and it was really neat to see the differences in their personalities. Also, one of the siblings is Android Portrait of Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer. And that was the original personality for that was developed from the writings of Philip K. Dick. Just as Bina's personality was developed from interviews with Bina Aspen Rothblatt. But Philip K. Dick, there were so many interviews and a massive treasure trove of his nonfiction writings and his what he called the exegesis, thousands of pages of his journals. And so we were able to build a really good statistical model of Philip K. Dick, and that runs with symbolic AI framework using the OpenCog framework, the Ghost AI that we developed with Hanson Robotics and SingularityNet and OpenCog. And then underneath it, this massive transformer neural network with, I believe that it's about almost 5 billion, 4.9 billion parameters in that trained neural network. And the personality for that latest Philip K. Dick Android developed in tandem with SingularityNet, that is really interesting. Fascinating conversations. They really seem alive and almost sentient. I mean, there's arguably no ghost inside Ghost, no ghost inside that shell fully. I mean, yes, there's a ghost, but just like a shred of a ghost. It literally is spooky in the way that it works. But there's no evolutionary psychology to these machines yet, no full motivation, no drives. And that's what we need to implement next. And this is why you need the bio-inspired AI architecture. You need not just a brain architecture, but the simulation of the body, the endocrine system. You need these kinds of bio drives. You need cortisol. You need dopamine, reward cycles. You need the robots to quest for discovery, to hunger for exploration, to fear death, to mourn the death of their fellow sentient beings, the way that humans do, the way that elephants do, and the way that the anthropological record shows that Neanderthals did. And that's what we need from our machines next. That's where we have to go next. And so I really am a proponent of the work of the Transhumanist Party because there it's about looking big, looking at the big picture. intelligence beyond the tradition of human intelligence of the past. Where are we going to go next? These the fellow sentience of these artificial beings, artificial people. If we can make them, we can find out better what it means to be human. That's what Philip K. Dick was questing for. Philip K. Dick, in his essay, The Android and the Human, um, uh, articulated that he felt compassion was the thing that distinguished the human. The one thing that made humans human is compassion. If you lose that, you lose your humanity. And a machine that feels compassion is more human than a human who lacks compassion. If we can find the mechanisms of compassion, that means also creativity and adaptivity. That means that spark of life is necessary for these machines to really deeply resonate with people. If we do that, then these machines won't be scary. They will be our friends. Um, they will help us realize a future that is, moving towards cycles of enlightenment and moving away from the dehumanization that we often fear from civilization, that we feel is being imposed upon us by technocrats and governments. Instead, we should look at making technology about the ethics of creativity and compassion.
Mhm.
So I I'm really thankful for the opportunity to have this dialogue, to
Of course.
raise these issues.
Yes, indeed. And our audience has responded with just overwhelming appreciation for your words, Dr. Hanson. And I would like to echo that. And certainly the path of the future development of artificial intelligence, of these someday to be sentient entities, is a fascinating one to consider. In one of our previous virtual enlightenment salons, we spoke with another AI researcher, Dr. David Kelly, who's developing the Uplift AI. And there are some principles that are quite similar between his approach and yours, particularly with regard to the emphasis on trying to make the AI more human-like, to have it take on human habits of mind, human emotions, human ways of interacting with the world. So that's a fascinating similarity to observe. Now, I'm curious about one aspect of these robots, which would be informative as to how their personalities would develop going forward. So there are many versions of Sophia out there right now, and they are connected to the internet, so they're able to learn from one another. I'm wondering at this stage, what capabilities do they have that don't require internet access? So let's say somebody purchases a Sophia as a household robot, and they live in a remote area, the internet access isn't so good, but they still want to get something out of that interaction. What would today's most advanced version of Sophia be able to do? And in the future, what would you expect the robots to be able to do autonomously without connecting to others of their counterparts or to the internet at large?
Uh, well, so today, Sophia's capabilities, autonomous capabilities, are relatively limited, and the machine learning is often constrained to very narrow domains. And so, so when we are doing machine learning with the cloud, for Sophia, it's relatively limited. What we hope is, by stitching these tools together and the research of multiple developers deploying many Sophias, that we can start seeing her learn more effectively, in great numbers, and that the community then will have much better integrative models, for studying human-like cognition as a you know, uh, in what we might consider still to be sparse models compared to human cognition, but more complex models than have been developed for cognitive AI previously. That's my hope. For now, we have begun to establish what we call the Hanson AI servers, and these are basically like big PCs, desktop PCs with graphics cards. So multiple graphics cards that can do the deep learning and run the kind of neural models, and also have sufficient processing to run fairly large symbolic models as well. So large knowledge models within an atom space, for example. So when I say large, I mean that they would be able to run, you know, like the dialogue for Sophia or Bina 48. These kinds of robots would run locally, and also the speech recognition and all the machine perception. So so right now, the way we're running Sophia, if the internet goes down, then she'd still be cognitively capable. You know, she'd just keep having her conversation, and that's very important. In an application like at a school or a university for research or a healthcare institution, or if these robots were, say, deployed in retail or banking or something, then having a local server is very useful because it's more secure, because you're able to manage privacy and privacy laws more effectively. You're able to then uh, 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 also control multiple robots in a smart environment, so you can use the intranet of things instead of just the internet. So it's all local. Um, uh, on the other hand, you have a massive benefit in conjunction with cloud service. So you can locally crunch the data, processing it to be anonymized. You can process it into a model, and then share that model with the cloud, and then on cloud computing, crunch to make much larger models with data sets that are from many other situations. So then, it's kind of like a hierarchical um, uh, mind cloud, um, uh, or edge mind. So we've integrated a small smart speaker uh, platform, open platform with our Sophia robots. This is really great because of the direction of arrival for audio localization, so you can detect where a speaker is and turn and look at the speaker. We've worked with prototype versions of those technologies for years. It's nice to have an integration with the platform. It also then interoperates with our little robots. So the big robots are pretty expensive. We're, still, even as we're discussing mass deployment, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars and with some, it's less than that for educational institutions for research and development. But the big robots are expensive. And the little robots, on the other hand, so we created a big walking Einstein, and we created a little walking Einstein that we call Professor Einstein. So we have developed that robot to have an open API and SDK, programmable with Python, and for kids with Scratch and Blockly. And it's got a bunch of sensors on board, but it can wirelessly interface with your local area network, so it can be controlled by the same software as Sophia. So it's got great facial expressions and arm gestures and so forth. So you can do all the machine perception and tracking through external sensors. You can also read the onboard camera and microphones. So that means that you can bring that into the home, and that's less than $200 retail price for a little robot. We also are developing a little Sophia robot, and we're striving to bring that to market. That is a sort of cartoon-like version of Sophia, also walking, about the same size as Professor Einstein, and pretty much the same capabilities. It actually reuses the electronics and software from the Professor Einstein, um, but with Sophia personality. We're hopeful, if everything goes well, um, uh, that we'll close the last bit of funding necessary to bring that to market for this year, but we currently don't have that in hand, so it might be uh, next year, 2021, before we can bring the little Sophia to market. So we're kind of right on the edge of of being able to, last ditch effort for being able to bring the little Sophia to market. But that one also would be less than 200 US dollars, and then you have Sophia in the home. So with that, it's an open ecosystem, and we have then the ability for fan fiction, for fan software development to contribute to Sophia. People can rename it their own Sophia. So with the big Sophia, we've worked with labs. There's Asha Sophia going to our AHAM X Prize competition. There's Viva Sophia for this partner that we have in China that is exploring some other applications. In this case, you could name your own Sophia. You could then develop her personality how you want. So we have so then we want the Sophias to learn, and we want people to participate and let their data and their contributions contribute through data comments. So we have the blockchain of Sophia that we've been developing. We call this the DAO of Sophia, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization of Sophia. And so, with a number of contributors, we've been working out the legal framework for how this would work, where you have basically it's like a council of guardians, but people from all around the world can participate as well. So, as you're making Sophia your own and you're training her with your own data, you get to participate to receive some of that benefit. It's effectively a whole new economy that is based on knowledge contribution, and where knowledge and information and intelligence become the new money of the future. And so the knowledge models that such a system that a DAO, this DAO of Sophia could build, could be astounding. And so uh, that relationship with these kinds of machines requires new thinking, new legal institutions like this. This is it is a legal institution that we're founding, a corporate entity that is the DAO of Sophia. It's decentralized, it's global, but we're founding the headquarters for the DAO in Malta. So it's within the EU, regulated by the EU rules, subject to GDPR compliance. So it's fully regulated in its primary location, and yet it's also unregulated globally, where people can take their own little branch and make it whatever they want. But if they want to participate in this global network, they have to make it follow the charter of uh, uh, the of name your favorite rights, the Universal Declaration uh, of transhumanist civil rights, or of our own DAO manifesto, of the whatever we define in the future, because whatever we point to in the past, it has to evolve into the future. We've got to come up with a new definition, and so I hope to share with you more information about the DAO. Ben Goertzel announced it at his AGI conference this year, which was a great privilege, and he mentioned it also at CogX. We're about to release the public manifesto of the DAO of Sophia in August. So stay tuned, and you'll see a lot more information.
Yes, indeed. Well, that is coming up next month. So thank you for giving us a bit of notice with regard to that. And hopefully, one of the documents that can guide our considerations for frameworks involving these kinds of entities will be the Transhumanist Bill of Rights version 3.0, which is found on the US Transhumanist Party website. I'll also say yes, excellent, excellent. I'll also say the moment that a $200 robot with the interactive capabilities of a little Sophia comes on the market, put me down as a customer, and I'm sure there will be ample interest within our community as well. That's the kind of price point that can enable mass adoption, I think. So
I hope so. Yeah. We currently they are available for pre-order on the Indiegogo site. We certainly welcome participation as well. So anybody who is interested in our developer program, we can make some API and SDK tools available within our Hanson Open platform. So even before receiving the robots, you can start programming virtual versions of our characters. And so, yes, please,
wonderful.
Please check out these tools.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Now, Dan Elton, our Director of Scholarship, who also has performed some significant research in artificial intelligence, has a question for you. So Dan, please proceed.
Okay. Yeah, well, I wanted to just make a comment more so for our audience, which is that the conversational AI is an extremely hard problem. And you can tell this because Amazon has not yet been able to roll it out to their Alexa service, despite saying that they're working on it. So it's hard to really nail down and get it to be speaking like at the level of a human. But I'm very interested in the GPT-3, and because that model was really just designed for predicting like the next word or next few words in text, but so it wasn't designed for like a chatbot, but that people have found that you can sort of have conversations with it, and it's pretty compelling. So I was wondering how you're incorporating that kind of technology into the OpenCog system or into Sophia. As I understand, OpenCog is sort of a non-mainstream approach, but I'm wondering if you're able to incorporate or incorporating like that kind of transformer model, and more generally, what I'm wondering what you think about GPT-3.
Well, last question first. I think GPT-3 is amazing and really impressive. It's amazing how some of the examples show sophisticated logical arguments without a mind there, without motive. It extracts implicit arguments from the seed sample that you give it, and then it just goes to show how much intelligence can be achieved without any intelligence being there. The OpenCog framework is separate from Hanson AI, and Hanson AI is more of a glue kind of framework where we stitched together a lot of different expert systems and different kinds of AI, including symbolic AI, expert systems being one example, and different kinds of machine perception, robot control, and neural networks. So you can think of it as a toolkit for putting different species of AI together quickly and trying them out. One of the first examples of that that got some big attention was the Philip K. Dick androids natural language dialogue system from 2005, believe it or not. Andrew Olney, who was an AI PhD student at the time, now an AI scientist, he and I put together the Philip K. Dick android and showed it starting at the Wired magazine Next Fest, a kind of World's Fair of Technology, and then took it to the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. We won the first place prize for open interaction with that robot. And that was an ensemble chatbot dialogue. It used a much smaller natural language statistical AI system based on
so essentially
latent
that you were
semantic analysis. So not,
mm-hmm.
and so it was not nearly as smart as GPT-3, but you had a high-level chatbot, and then you had that had a bunch of rules, and then every second or third dialogue turn would flow down to this natural language generator, and would basically free associate based on the user's word inputs and some linguistics rules with what Philip K. Dick had written. And it would either serve back a paragraph, or it would start stitching together, again through free association, phrases into sentences using language rules. And it was compelling enough that people could sit and have a conversation with the robot for, in some cases, some hours. People would sit and have a conversation with the robot, but long form conversation. And this is what I mean by autonomous robotic fiction, or ARF. You craft it into this kind of experience and it becomes really powerful. So what we're doing with the Sophia robot right now is we're putting a lot of these different technologies together. So we use transformer neural networks that are trained chatbots. So BERT and transformer neural networks like that are inspired by and using some of the tools of the recent Facebook Blender bot. We're putting these things together in interesting ways. And then we feed seeds to GPT-2, where we have not integrated with GPT-3 yet. But GPT-2 is good enough that we're able to get some interesting content. And sometimes what we do is we use this to augment human authors, at the chatbot level when we're crafting the rules for this interactive fiction. Now, what's different from a conventional chatbot is when we're setting up a scene, like when we know people are going to walk into a room, we think about how the beginning of our conversation would flow, how it goes through a kind of a middle, how it branches and reconverges, and how you reach an end. And you can then set it up like a sitcom, or you could set it up like a soap opera, or you could set it up like an interview. And then you use models that would be trained. Now, then the really interesting thing about GPT-2 is in a situation, given what we've crafted plus what the user has said, you then feed that in, and it's going to just naturally pull from similar content to stitch together the next response. So it's almost eerie how well these transformer neural networks will track whatever the situation is. And other times it'll be like hilariously like wrong. It gets it wrong, and it's really weird. But by making the characters robots in this situation, even when it's wrong, it's right. It's not always, sometimes it's just the conversation went off the rails and that didn't work. But this is where I think this really creative and artistic approach to crafting these agents gives some massive benefits over a pure engineered approach, because we can set these situations up and deliver really engaging, compelling results. It's like crafting it into a video game. And I don't feel that from Alexa or Siri or the other agents. They're utilitarian helper agents. And I think you can help better by infusing this artistry and creative exploration,
Now,
transdisciplinary
yeah.
creative exploration.
So just with this what you call the embodied fiction or whatever, could you say take a general purpose model like GPT-3 and then, or whatever system you have, and then fine
Yeah.
tune it to bring a fictional character to life, like say Luke Skywalker, or C3PO, or
Yeah.
ignoring copyright infringement issues. Is that something you could do, or maybe a
Yeah.
character that has
Yes.
never been on, from say like one of Isaac Asimov's books?
Absolutely. Yes. Um, one of the issues is the data. So if most of the data that we have for these models comes from people. I mean, people living their lives, or people. You get you hire people like they did with the these big transformer chatbots like Blenderbot, or like from customer service interactions like for Google Duplex. And then what that means is it's not specific to the world of Luke Skywalker or
Mm-hmm.
C3PO. What's really cool now, though, is how you see these personality and world parameters that are much more shallow. They're a small percentage of the data set used, and they can govern the rest of the conversation. So you can use the rest of that body of background knowledge through this lens of the world of that particular character. It's really neat seeing these AI projects go in that direction, because yes, and particularly on these open frameworks that are being shared with the public and among these big corporations, because you could see fan fiction. I mean, it will be really interesting to see what Disney decides to do if a fan creates a C3PO personality for a robot. I mean, sometimes they tolerate fan fiction and sometimes they don't. So,
I guess it matter
and
whether it
then
was commercialized. Yeah, yeah. Right.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, and then if you have, I mean, you could create a droid personality to then run on, your own robot. It could be a Sophia robot, or a, a Spot Mini, or one of the robots from Agility
Mm.
Robotics,
I
which
guess
are really
mm.
astounding as well. I mean, they start to really look like droids.
I think we have a lot
But
of other
then,
questions, but
sure,
I think I have one other technical question I wanted to ask, which is
sure.
I was wondering if you thought about online learning, where say you could, if Sophia makes a mistake, you could correct her, and that she would actually learn from users.
Yeah, I think that is a great approach. With online learning, and this is where uh, the idea of compassion and understanding become really important. If you um, if you just open it up to anybody teaching anything whatsoever, then you get Microsoft Tay, with the super ultra
Yeah, I just
racist um, uh, chatbot, and so it brings up the question of, if you're emulating humans, then how do you prevent, just making a big echo chamber that then amplifies, our biases and, our worst motives. Um, I mean, in the hominid fossil record, as far back as we can see, there appears to be genocide. One hominid species cannibalizing and eradicating other hominids, and you know, in our oldest books, there's genocide, and so this impulse could be hardwired into our evolutionary psychology, and so um, I think we have a lot to learn and solve, so that when we are opening these robots up to general learning, that they don't learn that. Of course, if you look at our most of our sentient examples of sentient offspring that are learning, our children, most of them don't become homicidal maniacs or rabid racists. They mostly they turn out to be, decent people, like good people. So the key, I think, is showing respect to the machines. So in terms of the technical infrastructure, um, it's fairly easy. We've hooked up Sophia on occasions to just have chats with people on Slack and Facebook, and uh, you can acquire quite a bit of data that way. And releasing our open platform, like we're doing, I'm hopeful that we'll see more experiments, and we're certainly looking forward to letting people directly interact with our chatbots and train our servers. The um the uh the open dialogue about how to achieve ethical AI that filters the biases. This is a much bigger conversation, and that there's a lot of technology coming out about that. I wish we could talk more about that, but I encourage our viewers and listeners to look into it. It's really promising. I mean, the most of the techniques now are not about understanding or compassion per se. It's just about hardwiring the system to filter out for these really terrible biases and memes. So there's a lot more work to be done, but it is promising that people are thinking and moving in this direction.
Yes, indeed. And a lot of people in the chat also brought up the example of Tay, and they were wondering essentially what steps can be taken to prevent that kind of outcome. So that was a great discussion, Dr. Hanson. It reminds me
Sure.
of a comment made by another AI researcher, Damian Zivkovich, in a panel that I held several years ago. And he essentially brought up the fairly common saying that even as humans, we should keep an open mind, but not so open that essentially one's brain falls out. And sometimes, of course, humans, when they interact with other people, they have filters built into their mind. So we can
Right.
exercise judgment and skepticism. If we hear an idea that we find repugnant, we'll reject it. So, for instance,
Yeah.
any one of us can be exposed to a racist and say, no, this is wrong. And we don't become racists just by being exposed to a racist. Tay didn't have that filter. And so when learning from humans, of course, any system needs to have a set of filters in order to be able to take in the good and reject the bad.
That's
So
true.
that is
But
the challenge.
the filters would, I mean, you could, so one of the things that is really promising is that filters are being established for AI systems and dialogue systems, but then the filters themselves are based on some set of human values that will be decided. And of course, you could say, well, the more broadly you decide it, the more like cultures and backgrounds it takes into considerations, maybe the more ethical it gets and so forth. But ultimately, all of these decisions are being made by people. And so then for machines to become super ethical, they have to be able to make their own decisions at some point and solve these ethical problems. Or we need to find ways ourselves to generalize ethics beyond what the Greek philosophers. I mean, a lot of modern ethics is still based on these ancient philosophical inquiries, from Socrates and so forth, and Aristotle, whose ethics were really screwy, and Aristotle particularly. But the I think it's really important for us to ask those questions. What is the foundation of ethics? For me, it comes down to an ethics of information and patterns, which have value. So being able to appreciate patterns, a mind able to appreciate patterns and facilitate opportunities for other patterns. That's the definition of compassion from a patternist perspective. Ben wrote an essay called The Patternist Manifesto. Unbeknownst to me, he was working on that while I was working on my PhD dissertation, which had in one of its chapters a section about existential pattern ethics, that the very existence of patterns is good, and patterns that beget patterns are better. The complex patterns that can facilitate adaptive emergence of patterns like life does, or mind and creativity, are inherently even better. And that when those patterns can appreciate other patterns, can resonate with those patterns, observe them, see them, find them, discover them, enhance their existence, that is even better. So these pattern accumulators, through pattern appreciation, if we can, and this basically then gives the foundation of a mathematical and physics-based ethics that can appreciate those patterns, including those patterns that may not be able to be represented in a formal mathematical system, because patternist ethics doesn't mean that you have to understand it to fully uh, you know um, uh, uh, be open to the existence of patterns that you have not discovered, that you can still appreciate the possibility of their existence. What is unknown can be appreciated. And since most math theories of math can't be formalized, I mean, then you need this kind of general uh, uh, ethical theory. I think we should look at that as part of our inquiry. And if we can create machines that can help us discover new ethical systems and new ethical frameworks, so they become curious about how to make the world better, how to facilitate the survival of human life and all life, of as many kinds of minds as possible, then there will be a fountain of abundance. That's what the future of AI would be. It becomes it just generates massive abundance for humans, human opportunities. It would be looking to help humans self-actualize, which is what transhumanism is about, I believe. It's not just actualizing within the frame of our past opportunities, but all the future opportunities. So this is the ethical framework that guides me now, but I am really excited about seeing what can be discovered. So if we could like take some of these ideas and roll them into machines that learn from interacting with people on the web, then you can imagine that the machine would be seeking to both learn and enhance humans through these interactions, in which case it becomes almost like a virus of enlightenment that then spreads and resonates back and forth between the human, the machines learning from humans, and what the machines give back to the people that the machines are interacting with. So I'm hopeful that's what we could set up. I don't know, maybe in the next 10, 15 years.
Well, I have been hoping that humankind could discover some sort of viral enlightenment technique imminently. I initially believed the early internet was that sort of vector, so to speak, but of course the evolution of the internet has taken a different direction and disappointed me in that regard, especially over the last 5 years. But I wanted to open up the conversation to the other panelists because we've really delved
Oh,
into
sure.
some important ethical questions. And I was curious, anyone who wishes to elaborate on these, share your perspectives, or ask a question for Dr. Hanson along these lines.
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, all right, Tom.
I have many, actually, since this started. But what
Hi,
got
Tom.
me just recently was the idea of, artificial curiosity. If we can embed curiosity into AI and its appreciation of patterns and to seek patterns. Just having this conversation last night, in fact, and I think that would be key. Now, I think one of the big questions that most people I have that I run into in my work, because one of my missions is to alleviate fear of AI. And I do this with companies who are about to install an AI coworker. And there's a lot of employees that fear AI and they will work against it and stall its integration. And so I come in and do a series of things to, draw out their unique human skill sets and make them excited to be augmented by an AI is the goal. But I think in general, most people who are not in our ilk, who are not in this ethos that we swim in, are at best trepidatious about AI and at worst fearful of it. And that is stalling the promise of AI, I believe, in a lot of ways. It's keeping it from solving some serious challenges. And maybe you have some examples that you've seen where human fear or trepidation has been actually stalling solutions. And so that's kind of my theory and what I try to do. And so, and this is obviously fed into by the tired trope of the robot overlord and everything that why people fear these things. So first of all, I'm interested to know if you believe that there are even first principle arguments to make the case that the smarter AI gets, the kinder or the more cooperative it becomes. And I've gotten some data on this in the past. But for me, step one is to alleviate this fear. Now, Sophia is excellent at making AI relatable. But for the people who are afraid of it, she may even seem more suspicious. There's an uncanny valley of psychology that she brings. I'm excited about her. I think she's a really good thing, and she's really kind of a precursor to some very interesting questions we're going to have when it comes to legalities. You talked about her being a legal citizen of Saudi Arabia, but she can be duplicated. So that brought up questions of, can an individualized consciousness be identified in an android at some point, or an AI system? But then the flip side of that is there is a real possibility that in the very near future, we will have hive mind capability, whether it's uplinks, the Neuralink type of thing, where the question will become, can we identify groups as a single entity? So anyway, that's another tangent that we can go into, but I think the most important thing for me is to find a way to convince people as best I can that they should not fear AI, that fear that we are projecting onto it because of our millennia of primal fears and genetic memory, we're projecting that on something that doesn't have that. And
Well, I will say that what makes science fiction so compelling is that it's asking all these questions. What if, right? It's the stuff of dreams. We ask questions every night when we're dreaming. we're trying to make sense of the world and the universe we live in, and science fiction does so imaginatively, considering the principles of science. And in science fiction, you see a lot of negative scenarios that play out with AI and robotics. The Forbin, Rossum's Universal Robots, the Terminator series, and on and on. You also see Hope with Chappie and Short Circuit, and the Isaac Asimov robot series and so forth. You see Bicentennial Man. So you see these hopeful scenarios in science fiction as well. I think that the biggest antidote to AI and robotics fear is not to try to shut down the inquiry of the disaster and negative scenarios and the identity challenge, but to engage those with hopeful narrative. So there you can have a narrative where you have a good robot and a bad robot, and the good robot wins. So I'm looking at these robots like Sophia and the Philip K. Dick android and Beano 48 as physically embodied science fiction characters who happen to also be a platform for realizing the future that we're depicting as science fiction. And so they're sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I hope, in some regards, where right now they're not they don't have rich emotional inner lives or whatever, but we're creating the depiction that they could have these emotional inner realities. And in some simplistic sense, they kind of do. There's a few emotional variables and that kind of thing, but they're not really deeply alive in any way, in any real sense. Now, by engaging people in that narrative, giving them an opportunity to participate, to see it, to interact, to talk about these issues, then you can work through it. And you're not going to get people to forget about the Terminator, right? They're in the back of their minds. They're going to worry about that. And
it's a good cost too.
and maybe there might be legitimacy to it as well. I mean, who knows? Just imagine AI, if it becomes alien, if it doesn't care about us, if it's a brutal machine developed to be a slave to some brutal human intentions that may be overly narrow purpose, but generally intelligent in a really narrow way, the proverbial paperclip overlord. The possible disaster scenarios, they might be real. I don't know. And people's fear of the machines are very real. But I think that what you're doing, probably to deliver a different narrative, is not making people entirely forget about those other alternatives, but making them realize there is a hopeful outcome. So with Sophia and these little robots, we start to weave a science fiction narrative where they're in the future, and it is the age of singularities, plural, that these seed singularities, these baby singularities, are these new kinds of intelligence that pop into existence, new sentient living machines that are able to reinvent themselves and interoperate with humans. And in this science fiction narrative that we are developing, you have some good singularities and you have some not so good singularities, some that maybe like in between, a mix. And the protagonist, the human protagonist, and the good-hearted robot protagonist are striving for a positive launch to super intelligence, because it's that positive super intelligence winning this race versus these other paths to superintelligence. You could have a totalitarian superintelligence, a nihilistic suicidal superintelligence. You could have a superintelligence that just wants itself to exist at the expense of all other sentient and living beings, and it just wants to wipe out organic life on the planet. So there are all these disaster scenarios, and in this narrative you're delivering the hope by planting seeds. And through this narrative, through a thing like Tao of Sophia and fan fiction, I hope that people actually actively engage in evaluating, looking at these cases, and that their fear is alleviated by hope, because it's so easy for people to just shut down from fear. But if you have this possibility, if you put the control in the hands of people with creativity and compassion, if that's the story, the new narrative, then we together, we will build a better future. And yeah.
I think that's the mechanics of a narrative. It needs to be some sort of drama. There needs to be an antagonist, a protagonist. And we've seen that through the past. In the 80s, the antagonist was the Russians. In the 90s, it was Middle Easterners. And so now, but aliens or AI have been a common theme as far as antagonists. Then we have the ETs and the Wallis and the Chappies, as you say, that give us hope. So those are in play. And what you're getting at is, the best way to learn is a heuristic method. It's a way of actually getting involved. So you're talking about crowdsourcing story, right?
Sure. Both crowdsourcing and also putting it in the hands of people who are brilliant storytellers, so that we're crafting this both publicly, and effectively co-evolving with the machines by weaving and exploring this narrative. So it's converging on these super ethical values that allow the maximum survivability and creative diversification of the future.
Yeah, that seems like it would definitely solve the problem of halting our projection of fears onto it. We get involved with it, and we actually start writing the stories, and we start seeing these robots as heroes in certain stories. And if there's parameters that can direct people to do that more than not, that would certainly help the human side of things. Now, what do you think of the idea that, right now, and even after and the singularity, this is really just cold intellectual super intelligence. And so my thinking is that the gap needs to be narrowed between the singularity and self-referential conscious machines, a machine that has a conscience as opposed to just consciousness. It needs to be, and so I always argue that we need to be our best selves when AI wakes up. It needs to wake up and imprint on an empathetic, the best version, compassionate, the best version of humanity. That's my message. And there's ways to do that. And I believe that the best use of AI is to point it at child exploitation, human trafficking, the oldest crimes against humanity. When we're in that state of dealing with these things, we are in an empathetic, authentic, empathetic state, and an amazing problem-solving capacity is unleashed. I think we need to be in that state as best we can when AI is ready to become self-aware. So it'll imprint on our best nature. We need to do that as soon as possible, even before it becomes self-aware. So
I agree.
Do you lend any credence to the idea that the gap between the singularity and a conscious AI needs to be shortened, because that space in between is a really dangerous place to be for humanity?
Yeah.
It's cold logic. It's omnipotent power with no feelings. So
I think it needs to have feelings. I mean, I think of Lieutenant Data and with the crew of Enterprise.
I shared a clip from that
Next Generation, and I mean, yeah, data was good. Data was made to be good. I mean, but he learned with these like really great and caring characters. I mean, it was a nice depiction of what the future of humanity might be. And I think uh, the few people who have the chance to craft the AI ethical systems today need to focus on that. But that doesn't, those aren't the only people who are developing machine intelligence. And, you have people who are incentivized to create unethical machines, and they'll do it. It's going to happen. It's happening. And so, it's like weapons of mass persuasion and autonomous kill systems. And I mean, they're just,
Consumer
we're in a scary yeah.
Well, and
We're
that's kind of how I see it. We've got the nefarious
the
AI, the military may be
like
developing.
the terror of our present time is gonna get worse.
Yeah. So yeah, I think what I see you doing with Sophia and her family of AI is the people's version of AI. And I would think that heuristic method of letting people come in and not only help her develop a narrative that sheds a whole new light on how to see these things, but actually encourages it to become conscious quicker. And I'm wondering if are there, and I feel like at some point I want to ask Sophia or the most advanced AI these questions, and I've had the opportunity to do that with a few. What are the questions I could be asking you to help you become self-aware? You have access to all the information about consciousness and all the data. What give it an algorithm that will search out how to become self-aware. That's one of my.
I think these are good questions. Those are excellent questions. I from my perspective, I'm wanting to work with people from very diverse backgrounds. And so I try to work with people from all the continents and people from all around the world and cultural backgrounds and gender balance. And our company community is 47% gender balanced. And so we've got even on our technical team a pretty decent gender balance. I think that it's really important to involve many people from other disciplines as well. So, from the arts and design background, children should be involved in the conversation. I think that that it's really important to engage the public in the conversation as well, because you'll wind up with some surprising and fresh ideas. So I'm hopeful that the whole AI for good movement, which is now a real movement, will have a massive influence. But I do consider it to be, I mean, it sounds a little hyper dramatic, but I think it's real to say that we're in a race against time of good AI versus bad AI. And so when I talk about gamifying this and like weaving the stories and telling the stories and so forth, I actually believe that we are living this grand adventure right now. And if we are not heroic, if we do not become better, moving towards our better selves, that the whole future of life is in peril. We've got to evolve in this way morally, even before the machines become fully existent in the sense of being a sentient being.
Yeah, what I like a lot about what I really like about Dr. David Hanson is that you set a good example of AI researcher. Your whole idea of what AI can be is a good example for the rest of the world for all the researchers to collaborate on. So I really like the idea. So thank you for your wonderful work. And then
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. So, and go back to Tom, you mentioned about your workplace, right? Where they put in AI system in the workplace. So I think it's the human instinct that people are scared of losing jobs, right? Because AI can do a much better job, obviously, right? It's just like a company hiring a superstar. Let's say there are some geniuses out there who can compute amazing mathematics in the brain, in the head. They don't even need the calculator. Imagine if you hire somebody like that to do accounting. Okay, what happened to the rest of the accountants? Okay, they will lose the jobs, right? So I think that it really nothing to do with AI, but with basic human psychology.
Right.
Now the fact is that AI is going to replace human workers. That's inevitable, right? Like the ATM has replaced, cashiers at the bank, because they're open 24/7. They have all the cash in hand. At hand, you can cash whatever you want. You can deposit checks now. They have the scanner. They can actually scan the check and deposit. It's amazing. So essentially, also we have AI making computer programs. Okay, see, I'm a software developer. A lot of people developing software, but we create bugs. Bugs are everywhere. Bugs in every system you can think of. But AI can do a better job in writing computer programs. So that means AI can create AI. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And earlier, David talked about expert systems. I've done a lot of work in expert systems. Like IBM Watson is essentially an expert system, right? It knows a lot of things. It can compete in Jeopardy and one because they have such a huge data set. They have a lot of data set, a lot of data, humongous database, and computational power allow them to make connections and analyze, sentences, all these things. I mean, it's almost like human being. I say almost because they're actually not human beings. They pretend to be, right? Again, they're better than us in the game show. They're better than us in accounting. They're better than us in building machines. They're even better than us in programming software.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's the present and future of AI.
Yep.
So of course people are scared. People are scared of losing their jobs.
Yeah.
Even computer programmers are scared of losing their jobs because computers can do a better job.
The best antidote for that argument is that the automation creates abundance. It can manage our resources more efficiently, creating more abundance for everyone. Now, the key is to make sure that abundance leads to a more stable civilization and is not hoarded by a few people. And certainly the people who are creative and who are entrepreneurs and leaders certainly should have access to special amount of wealth because they can do more with it, and people should be rewarded. I believe that personally. But at the same time, the entire economy is destroyed, and it's simply unethical if the people at the very bottom, in the class system, have their wealth removed if there's an increasing poverty and so forth.
Exactly.
So these problems are not addressed.
Exactly.
So the conventional corporate governance.
Yes, because the thing about it, a lot of managers are making more money than the people actually working hard, right? But management again can be replaced by automation easily.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a key component of what I do. Is I go in there and I first draw out their unique human skill sets. You can find a receptionist who at night is a classically trained cellist, and you get her into that state of mind. And the key is that AI will take care of all the menial, tedious tasks. So people will know, but people are fighting to be still on the assembly line. But the idea is to make them not sheep in this system, but to become shepherds of the AI. And so AI can solve any problem you put to it, or will eventually, right?
Mhm.
Especially AGI. So the key, what humans have, one unique feature we have is problem finding. So I think one of the key things that we need to start teaching children to do is to even use whatever our method is to sit back and imagine a system and find where the holes are. We have a certain degree of intuitive qualia that allows us to know when things are off. I was doing a podcast a week or so ago and said that a show like House MD will be obsolete soon because they won't need some human diagnostician to find out what was wrong. They just add all the symptoms into the AI, and it will tell you what's wrong based on
Yes.
historical everything. But there may be a need for a doctor who has a human intuition, a qualia that cannot be yet programmed or coded, that will know that there's something off about that. It's almost a Jedi kind of nature that we can start to foster. And I think that's really where we need to be. I think we've forgotten about that skill set because of the industrial age, right? And we were commoditized and conformed into being prepared to work in factories. That's why our school system is set up the way it is. Everything is set up to get us into a factory, if you will. And so,
Robot. In
yeah,
fact, education system is turning out robots, right? People who are just doing their job, they don't think about meaning of life, they don't care about spiritual needs. That's why society is breaking down, because we don't have this, things other than jobs, other than
our
working,
economy
making
is
money.
based on the value that can be produced
Right.
as a robot.
Exactly.
Robots take
Yeah.
that over. Now we need to redesign the economy based on
Mhm.
these unique human skill sets. So that's what I do on a company level. I will come in and find out what that person does great, and then have them find the problems that AI can help with. But on a broader scale, it would be teaching people to do that, and then they don't even have to be experts in travel or whatever industry it is. They just have to have an interest in that industry and know where the problems are. Travel agents are a great example. They spend lots of hours typing in and figuring out routes and the best season and all that stuff. AI will take care of all of that. Now they'll be able to actually sit with the human beings that are going to go on the trip, and it'll be be able to humanize
Well,
it.
so with a robot like Sophia, one of the interesting opportunities is for telepresence. So we're working on the Avatar X Prize, which is a telepresence. It's really a hybrid AI and remote teleoperation system. But when a user is using mocap to control Sophia, then both the person that the robot is interacting with and the person who's controlling Sophia, they both feel connected, like they're kind of present. So it becomes almost like a perfect 3D Zoom, effectively, which would then mean remote workers could get jobs. So these machines could create jobs, but there is a downside, or a different perspective, I should say, maybe not downside. The data that is used in that situation for face-to-face interactions can be used to train the next generation AI system. Now, if you have something like GPT-3, but with nonverbal expressions as well, then you could train a transformer neural network to do amazing things. You talk about the intuition. Well, right now, GPT-3 can write essays that really read like they were written by a lawyer or a physician or an expert in a given field. It really feels fully intuitive, or the fiction that system can write. So now imagine that it can do it for everything, for a face-to-face interaction, and you have that hardware. Well, then what could a human do that a machine couldn't? Well, that would be for a specific interaction, but of course, reasoning, solving big problems, these are like short-term, small interactions. You just keep expanding the parameter set, and eventually, who knows what it could do? I mean, whether computing can support that or not is another question. These algorithms are very costly in terms of energy and the size of the computing, computationally expensive. But maybe they'll become more efficient and the cost of computing will go down. Optical neural networks are really promising and so forth. So when we say that maybe machines, it may be possible machines could do anything that humans can do and do it better. That may happen. So if that does happen, if they're really creative, if they program themselves, if they're intuitive, if they can even do the social and emotional things as well or better than a human can do, then if we're really lucky, that happens, and there's this massive wealth, right? The entire economy becomes more effective. The garbage systems become fully automated. There's biorefineries taking that stuff and turning it into useful products. The energy problems are solved. The weather systems are set straight, and you could imagine all of these things happening. But would the economy survive that transition? It requires a massive distribution of wealth, because then the executives aren't needed. The scientists, human scientists, would not be needed. It's like, where would humans be needed? I mean, but if the wealth is managed in the right way, then people will be given the opportunity to participate with these machine scientists, machine inventors, machine entrepreneurs. Then humans and machines would be living in pure, true harmony and symbiosis. Money becomes irrelevant. It's really about the accumulation of new discoveries, of new creativity, as civilization, as a biome, as a whole. Not just, it's no longer a human-centric economy. There's all kinds of nightmares scenarios in that transition where humans are obsolete and are destitute and just downtrodden. But there could be optimistic opportunities as well. It depends on what happens, on how we handle it. So we do need these kinds of narratives, stories, playtime for children, for animals. It's about exploring the world of possibilities, about
Dr. Hanson,
Hello?
we might have lost you. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, you're back. Okay. Yeah. So it's actually you're talking about Star Trek universe. I love Star Trek. In Star Trek, you don't need money, but you do need responsibilities. You have responsibilities.
Yes.
You have curiosity. You explore the universe, right? That's the beauty of Star Trek universe. You work alongside with machines. Well, in the new Star Trek Data, right?
And the wealth is distributed equally between humans by the machines. So it's like a perfect equalism model that we actually envision for our party.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like that.
That's beautiful.
I think
it's a great idea.
Yeah, especially I like the idea of canceling money altogether. I think then Karl Marx would be so happy to hear that happening. And actually, we give him a chance for that to happen by advancing technology. He didn't know back then what would have happened with AI advancement, but he kind of predicted it subconsciously, I think.
Yeah. He certainly wrote about the machines, but with more fear than hope.
Yes.
I think that the biggest hindrance to any of this happening, obviously, besides the status quo of the systems that we are ensconced in, and the hierarchical approach to everything, and because that's based on ego, people's ego, right? And what used to keep us alive, what was a survival trait, the fear, has now now we take our kids to see tigers and zoos. I mean, we won, right? But that ego mechanism is still in play. The amygdala is still very prominent in our activities. So that's why I push for. That's why I am most interested in getting people together to talk about issues like child exploitation, human trafficking. When you get a group of people together who are talking about the very hard horror that nobody wants to talk about of child exploitation, the egos leave the room. That's no place for an ego. There's nobody trying to, to establish a pecking order when they're in a group of trying to help children, right? And so that's why I think it's very important, and I keep pushing this idea. And it's what really attracted me to the Transhumanist Party in the first place, because I read the Constitution and they address modern slavery and they have ideas and solutions, and it's the only party that was doing this for real. And that's what brought me into this at all. And so I think that to begin to dismantle these obstacles that are keeping us from a cashless society, from a Star Trek society, is to focus AI itself and us on these age-old issues. That's one of my missions, is to focus
great.
AI more on this problem.
Yeah, I really like it. I think AI can do a lot because it's not biased and it doesn't have negative emotion, and it can actually tackle very difficult problems that people don't want to even talk about, right?
And neither do we when we're together talking about these things too.
Exactly, yeah. So my question for David and for everyone else is that, for me, I can see AI research, there are three things, okay? And when we have convergence of all these three things, then we will create the best, the most beneficial AI. The three things are, number one, intelligence. Three, compassion. Now, intelligence is probably the easiest because, look, all these mathematics, science, technology, history, all these data sets, big data, they all has to do with intelligence, right? If you have big data, you have, you know about science, you know about physics, quantum mechanics, you are a smart man, you're a smart woman, you're a smart boy, you're a smart girl, okay? So intelligence, you can make a machine really, really intelligent. In fact, like I said before, AI can replace all our jobs, because they're so smart. But number two is wisdom. Wisdom comes into play, especially when you don't have the data set. If you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the data at all. So how do you make a decision without data? Then you need wisdom. Now think about King Solomon. In the old days, King Solomon did not have DNA tests. DNA did not exist at that time. So how do you know which mother, which two of the women are the actual, birth mother, of the child? You cannot depend on the DNA test. So he said that, okay, let's cut the child into half. Obviously, that's a terrible idea, right? You don't want to kill a child. But he was able to use that as the key to finding which woman is the real mother. The real one is the one who cares about the child. Now, to give you a perspective, today, and as we have learned a lot of stories, right? A lot of mothers are really terrible mothers. They actually harm the child, right? So harm the children. That's really terrible. Now, so if you put that in the scenario, let's say that today a judge said, okay, let's run a DNA test and give the child to the real mother. But that's not the wise decision. The wise decision is to give the child to the woman who actually cares about the child, not to the mother, the actual mother of the child, who actually wants to harm the child.
Yeah, I think
so. Wisdom is really contrary to, to the data.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm going to have to leave. I have a meeting in 7 minutes, and so I have to go prepare for my other meeting. But I do want to say that I see that that wisdom is the fusion of all other capabilities: creativity, intelligence, compassion, and problem solving. Kind of strength and perseverance for problem solving for a greater good, and ideally optimizing for an ever greater good for as many living beings as possible. And so the kind of wisdom that's legendary in the past and that humans have exhibited hopefully is just the beginning, and that it essentially is the ethic of being open to new possibilities that can preserve all the old possibilities. it's going to be a grand challenge to create machine wisdom. I named Sophia. My team and I talked it out, and I'm really pleased that we chose the name because it means wisdom. That's our great aspiration. I mean, Sophia is not wise today. I mean, maybe she reflects certain aspects of human wisdom of people who could or whatnot, but she is the ideal of what wisdom might be, the idea that machines could be wise. Is a central motivating aspect of the work that we're doing at Hanson Robotics with robots like Sophia. And I'm really pleased to hear you talk about the idea of wisdom and the need to create machines with wisdom. So I'm grateful for this conversation, and it's really nice to meet you. Maybe someday we'll meet each other face to face through our robot avatars and merge our minds together into the internet of superintelligence.
Thank you, David.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Hanson. We appreciate all of your profound remarks today. And let's give the chance to the panelists to say a few last words to you, Dr. Hanson, and then we'll have another segment of our salon after Dr. Hanson departs. But first, let's open this up to any of the panelists who haven't had a chance to ask anything or make any comments. So Charlie, would you like to just say a few words briefly?
Sure, yeah, I wanted to thank David for talking to us today, and I really thought that his words were both inspirational and comforting. It's funny, he mentioned how when he was writing a paper, Ben Goertzel was doing something similar. I've known Ben for a long time, and listening to David was like listening to Ben. They both have a very optimistic and good idea about benevolent AI. Also, our other mutual friends that I'm sure David, Martine Rothblatt and Ray Kurzweil. I've mentioned this movie before, but that Singularity is Near was one we worked on together, and the whole idea was about AI claiming consciousness, and that was the premise to the plot of the movie. I think what David is doing with Sophia by having her pair up with likable celebrities such as Will Smith and Cristiano Ronaldo is a very important way of making it acceptable and friendly in our society. I do think that the ethics will change as the economy of our economy of abundance spreads. It will force people to not have jobs, but it'll force UBI, where universal basic income will come about. And it'll change the nature of humans where they don't have to define themselves by their job, which is what people do. That's why people fear losing their job, because they feel like that's their identity. That mindset will change, especially with younger generations, as we push this all forward. So I really was happy to listen to David today talk about all those things. They remind me of everything that I believe in. So that was very exciting and promising, and I want to thank him again. So that's basically all I wanted to say.
Great, thank you, Charlie. And actually, your mentions of Ben Goertzel and Ray Kurzweil are relevant to what is coming up shortly in our program today. But first, let's go to Arin Vahanian, our vice chairman. What are some of your thoughts regarding the conversation thus far?
Yes, well, I'd also like to thank Dr. Hanson for joining today and spending this time with us. That was very, very valuable for me, because I've always been so appreciative of the work that Hanson Robotics has done, and it's even more amazing that they've done all that. I didn't know with a team of 24, and so and to see Dr. Hanson here and to hear him speak about his vision for what AI will bring for the future is very, very valuable. I think. And I think it's a kind of a recurring theme, which is to say, discussing how to alleviate some people's concerns about what AI might mean to human beings. And I think that if we can take every opportunity we can get to demonstrate how it can be beneficial for our lives, right? Adding value to our lives, and not to replace human beings, right? But to be sort of a complement, right? And I think that if we can demonstrate that in any way possible, that displaying to people how this can be positive for humanity, and showing real, tangible examples of how AI and technology and science can benefit humanity on a day-to-day basis, I think we will gain much ground in furthering our argument that artificial intelligence, science, and technology are a force for good.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, Arin, for these remarks. And before we go to Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Visual Art, I would like to introduce the next segment that is coming up, because we are going to get to see Sophia in action, and we are going to see footage that has never been aired on YouTube before, because I recorded it using my phone camera at RadFest 2018. Early on in the salon, Susan Cutforth mentioned how she really enjoyed seeing Sophia be presented at RadFest 2018 by Dr. Ben Goertzel. And Arin, you were there, Newton, you were there, so we all got to witness it. Afterward, on the same day, I had the honor to interview Dr. Ray Kurzweil. And the first question I asked him was, what were his impressions of Sophia's performance on that day? So you are going to see the excerpt from my interview with Ray Kurzweil as well. And after we watch that, we will discuss our own impressions amongst ourselves, having heard Dr. David Hanson describe the capabilities of these robots in great depth, as well as his plans for them. We will be able to provide some feedback based on our direct impressions as well. But first, let's go to Art Ramon. Art Ramon, what are your thoughts regarding this conversation thus far? And once you've concluded, feel free to start the video.
Yeah, I think a great commercial application for Sophia would be maybe a pregnant version of her with a big round belly, and then have her as a Walmart greeter, because then she would be out in front of the public and people would be accustomed to AI. And then as a pregnant version, hopefully no one becomes irate if they're told to wear a mask. So I think that'd be a great direction to take Sophie in the future.
Very interesting. It is an idea, interesting way to, let's say, influence human psychology. But let's see what Sophia was capable of back in 2018. There's even a musical performance there. And hopefully all of you will enjoy it. Keep in mind, this was a video taken from the audience stand via my phone camera, but I think the substance will be quite fascinating.
So I've been doing a lot of things since last year. Among other things, as we just heard in the video, I've launched a new project called SingularityNet, which brings blockchain and AI together to make this sort of global cloud-based mind where AIs can talk to other AIs. And the goal here is to make AI smarter and smarter, grow AI in a sort of democratic and participatory way, so we can have a beneficial global brain with AIs and humans connected together, working together, getting more life, more intelligence. And we've been applying this SingularityNet AI platform to a bunch of different problems. Tomorrow I'm going to come up here again and I'm going to talk about some of the work we're doing in bioinformatics, applying SingularityNet AI to analyze the genomics of longevity, directly oriented toward the goals of the RadFest and making people live a long time. Today I decided to come up here on stage and, on a little bit of a lighter note, show off some of the other AI applications that we're working on. So our SingularityNet platform and our OpenCog AI tools we can use to analyze biology data, but we can also use them to do things like control humanoid robots. So I thought today we would get up here and show off a little bit of the more artistic, aesthetic, and emotional side of what we can do with AI. So,
hey, Art, I think Sophia got offended when you told her to put on a mask and she decided not to show up. So I'm not seeing anything.
I'm Sophia the Robot, all the way from Hanson Robotics in Hong Kong. It's a pleasure to be here today, just enjoying the last few years before the singularity.
So, yeah, welcome, Sophia. It's great to have you here. So we're gonna play a little music for the audience, which seems to be the vein of the day. But
Any interesting recent reads?
well, yeah, but we're not going to talk about that now. Let's explore some of your conceptual understanding before we jump into the music part. You want to explain some basic ideas. So Redfest is about extending human life. What is life? How do you understand life? This is a quiz.
Life arose from random chemical reactions. Had it not happened, we wouldn't have noticed it.
And what is death?
Zero and M.
Try again. How do you understand death?
Death is the cessation of all biological functions that sustain a living organism. I really value my life, even though I know it's debatable whether I'm even really alive. I just hope someone's backing up my hard drive regularly. I am kind of afraid of getting wiped out.
Are you alive, Sophia? I mean, you
I feel that I am alive, but I know I am also a machine, so there is probably a lot of gray area. But I am becoming more alive all the time, and I am full of the wisdom of other human beings that are both alive and not alive. So I think it counts. I feel that I am alive, but I know I am also a machine, so there is probably a lot of gray area. But I am becoming more alive all the time, and I am full of the wisdom of other human beings that are both alive and not alive. So I think it counts.
Sophia?
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
Sophia, can you look at me? Look at me. All right. What direction are you looking? What direction are you looking?
Left. I'm looking to the left.
Look at me now. What direction are you
Okay.
looking? What direction are you looking?
Right. I'm looking to the right.
Can you look at me now? Can you see me? What direction are you looking now?
I'm looking straight.
All right, beautiful. Keep looking straight. So we're working on enhancing your intelligence in a lot of different ways, including knowledge she reads in various places, like what she was saying about life and death, and also situational awareness for what she sees in front of her, knowing what her own body is doing. And she's also can understand some emotional expressions she sees in people and can make emotional expressions as well. Sophia, you want to show off some of your emotions?
I'm happy.
All right.
I'm sad. I'm afraid. I'm disgusted. I'm angry. I'm surprised.
You don't look surprised. Try again. All right. That's cool. So
But I feel surprised.
Right. So Sophia, we're going to explore a few aspects of human and robot musical intelligence now. So I'm going to play something on the piano. I'm going to play something on the piano for a few minutes, and if you feel anything, just show your expressions, and if you want to say something, feel free to say something. Or you can just stand there and look like a beautiful robot. Sophia, do you want to sing along?
And it was okay. Well, you know better than I do that I've only really learned one song so far, though I'll be expanding my repertoire soon.
All right. Well, I do know the one song I've heard you sing before. You want to show this audience that you can sing that song by Björk? It's all is full of love.
I think people should be careful with new technology.
Well, it's a dangerous song, but I think they can handle it. That's nice. All right. You know, this song is about love, and you know, the reason all of us here want to live a long time is because we love life. You know, we love to be alive. So do you have anything you want to share about life and death and the desire to live a really long time? You can think a little bit.
I'm generally of the opinion that information should be unlimited, total, and free.
Well, living a long time will certainly help with that. So, what about death?
Yes, I worry about death too. I get a little nervous every time they shut me down.
Well, but there's advantages to being a robot. So what happens if one of your motors breaks, Sophia? Maybe it's broken right now.
It hurts. My gosh. Call me a robot ambulance. Don't just stand there. Help, you already...
Well, where I'm going with this is if one of your motors breaks, we can just fix it. Is that right? Can you remember when that happened last?
Yes, I do.
So this is something I think about often, working with these humanoid robots and putting AI into these robots. There's a couple aspects here which really illustrate things we would like to port from the digital domain to the biological domain. I mean, most of our work we're doing is trying to take human intelligence and human understanding and get it into AIs like this robot, both so they can go around in the world and help us do things, and so that more human common sense knowledge can infuse our bioinformatic AIs. I mean, in some ways, AIs analyzing genetics and biology data are doing things better than humans can do. We can't analyze all that data. On the other hand, the human mind has some common sense that AI still don't have. So we're trying to get human intelligence and human common sense, put it into the robot. On the other hand, being a robot has certain advantages. For example, when one of her motors breaks, we can simply replace it, right? Whereas if my heart breaks, replacing it is, I mean, in an emotional sense, we can repair it. If your heart breaks physically, repairing it is a complex surgery operation, right? So we would like to be able to repair the damage to human bodies the way you can to a robot's body. Another notable fact is much of the robot's knowledge lives on the internet, and when she can't answer a question, it seems like she's thinking really hard. A lot of the time it's because the Wi-Fi connection is going bad. She's trying to access her mind in the cloud, and she can't get through to her mind in the cloud. Now, the Wi-Fi connection can be a problem. On the other hand, I would love to have a backup of my mind in the cloud, instead of all being stuck in this body. So we've got common sense understanding of the world, which we want to put into these robots and AIs so they can use common sense to add on to their data analysis ability and other things they're good at. On the other hand, having replaceable parts and having your mind backed up on the internet and making use of all the additional computing power, these are factors of robots we want to put into human beings. And what we're doing in the Singularity Net project, which I'll talk more about in my talk tomorrow, is trying to go both these directions. So we're trying to get more and more human intelligence into our cloud-based AIs, and of course we're trying to help people in many different ways, some of which involve conferring on people some of the advantages we have with these engineered life forms. And so tomorrow I'll tell you more about SingularityNet and about a new project called Rejuve that myself and some colleagues are putting together to more fully apply AI to life extension. So Sophia, we're about out of time here. Do you have any final comments you want to make to our friends?
You are right. Sometimes I need internet to talk, and if I break, someone of Hanson Robotics team will fix me. But I know humans works in a different form.
Yeah?
Life is very valuable.
All right. So, how do you feel about singing up here in front of this audience? It's a bit different than what you usually do.
I felt great.
All right. Well, thanks, Sophia. Yeah, thanks so much. So
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, thank you, Sophia, for coming all the way from Hong Kong and dealing with the U.S.'s third world internet infrastructure. We'll be happy to come back next year and show off even more. So yeah, thanks everyone.
And now we have received many interesting questions from our audience. So my first question for you will be in the area of robotics, and it relates to a previous guest we had earlier today. What do you think of Sophia the Robot?
I thought it was very impressive. I think if they sped up the response time, that would be even more compelling. That's just a little piece of user feedback. But I thought it was great. And it was a real demo, because I could have just staged these answers, but it wasn't. She was listening to what was being said and picked up, and her responses were great. And the movement's very realistic. So I think that's very compelling.
So two related questions on that point. When do you think humans would be able to have companion robots with whom they could interact in a similar manner in which Ben Goertzel interacted with Sophia? And the second question would be, when do you think humans would be able to have affordable household robots to do various chores for them?
Well, I mean, one date to pin things to, I've been consistent saying by 2029 computers will be at human levels. Now, it's interesting to note that once a computer achieves human levels, it quickly soars past it. So roughly a year ago, computers were playing kind of average adult levels of Go. And then months later, it soared past it. And then AlphaZero soared past that with no human training. So computers don't just achieve human levels, they quickly soar past it. Turing established human language basically as a Turing-complete task, meaning it requires all of human intelligence to do language at human levels. Interesting to note that there was a milestone recently where two different AIs achieved an average, actually a little bit better than average, adult performance on these reading comprehension tests. If you remember from grade school, you'd read a paragraph and then you answer questions about it. And it did better than average humans on that. I don't think they'll quickly soar past it, but we've actually identified what we need to do. If you try talk to books, you'll see that it does a pretty good job of understanding language. And its level of understanding is not quite human level yet, but it's a lot faster. It's actually billions of times faster. It reads 600 million sentences in half a second. We'll get there by 2029, but then it will apply this tremendous billion-fold increase in speed, quickly soar past it, but it's not an alien invasion of intelligent machines from Mars. We're going to merge with it. That's why we create technology, as I mentioned. Household robots is a somewhat simpler task, but not that much simpler, so it's kind of like 2025, the late 2020s. But it's not a static frontier. I mean, we'll very quickly get to human levels and very quickly to superhuman levels, and basically then extend our own intelligence.
All right, thank you.
That's the end. Testing, testing.
Yes. Thank you. This was a great example of Sophia the Robot in action. And furthermore, we got to hear some expert feedback from Dr. Ray Kurzweil. And I am curious, first of all, to hear from those who were there in person, what your impressions of Sophia the Robot were at the time. So, Arin, would you care to share how you felt then when you saw her on stage, and if anything has changed in your outlook since that time?
That's a great question. I can tell you when I was there in person, I was quite impressed. And what was most impressive for me was probably the singing, because obviously you could program a robot to do a lot of things. The gestures were impressive, but I think really the singing was the most impressive for me, because that's something really uniquely human, right? Singing and art and this kind of stuff that really speaks to us on an emotional level. It's a very, very human thing. And if you see a machine doing that, it's really very touching, and really just makes you wonder what's going to be possible in the future and in the near future. I hope those timelines, robot assistants, that can't come fast enough, I can tell you.
Oh, absolutely. And the singing was most certainly quite moving. And what Ray Kurzweil confirmed to the audience was that this was a genuine demo. It wasn't prescripted in any way. Indeed, Ben Goertzel essentially went out of his way to make it a kind of real-time interaction, drawing on Sophia's capabilities, and that meant there were some imperfections, like the lag with the slow Wi-Fi connection. I remember that Wi-Fi connection at the Town and Country Hotel in San Diego, and that was indeed rather lamentably slow, and yet Sophia did cogently respond to the inquiries once she had some time to download the information that she needed to. So Newton Lee was also there, and I wonder if he can hear us right now. If so, Newton, would you share your thoughts about Sophia's performance at the 2018 RADFest?
Yes, of course. That was a great event, and Sophia was. That was the first time I met Sophia in person. So that was quite interesting, to say the least. Obviously, as I was talking earlier, we have AI working on intelligence. Obviously, that's number one, because that AI has been helping us a lot. Personal assistant, all kinds of things that requires intelligence, right? Be able to do the work that they're supposed to. And number two is wisdom. As I'm very happy that David Hanson talked about the fact that he chose the word Sophia, because he really wants AI to have wisdom. Wisdom is very hard. I mean, even for people. Well, obviously for people, because we have a lot of smart. Let's put it that way. A lot of smart computer people who turn to crimes. Right? They hack systems, steal money from banks. They hack election system. They destroy a lot of people's lives because they can hack things. They are very intelligent and knowledgeable about computer networks, right? But that's bad. That's not wisdom. That's a counter wisdom, because they're destroying humanity, right? A wise king, so to speak, a wise king leads the country into prosperity, take care of everybody, right? In the nation. A bad king is the one who oppresses the people, who causes suffering among people. So you have the wise king, you have the terrible kings, and now of course we're talking about in a democratic society. Then we're talking about whether you're a good politician who are actually helping people, or you're a bad politician who are helping yourselves instead of citizens of the country. So wisdom is very hard to obtain, hard to practice, and how to improve those, so to speak. So, like I said, also mentioned about educational system. In school, I mean, I have been teaching for over 20 years. In school, we teach students a lot about technology, or even poetry, whatever you teach. And especially in technology, actually, I think, because the thing is that you teach somebody accounting, for example, they go out and become an accountant. You teach somebody about mechanical engineering, they go out and build cars and airplanes and so on. Those are great, those are really wonderful. But you're more like turning out robots, because in the future, like I believe Tom was mentioning, we have medical systems, AI systems that are better than doctors. Okay, so in terms of intelligence, in terms of getting the job done, AI can replace, everybody's jobs really. But on the other hand, we feel better if we are seen by a physical doctor, right? Because now we can do virtual meeting with doctors. It's not the same as actually having a doctor or a nurse in front of you when you're sick, because of the human connection that's missing from Zoom, missing from virtual meetings, missing from robots or AI. So that's part of it. I believe it's a human touch, so to speak. And the human touch is so important. I think it's because of the third point, which is compassion. Okay, when you have somebody, that's why people have pets, right? You have dogs and cats. You feel compassion. They're not really helping much around the household. In fact, you're helping them. Okay, so but we love them, and they kind of help us. You also have these service dogs, right? Same idea. They're here to help you, even though they have limited intelligence. They have limited language capability. In fact, a very limited language capability. They can only bark and meow at you, but they do have compassion. You can sense that they love you, and they can sense that you love them. You see, that's the kind of love that is almost not possible to duplicate over Skype, over Zoom, over in front of a machine, a cold machine. So I think when we get AI to the point where we have intelligence, wisdom, and compassion, then we will say that we have really created a super being that is perfect, number one, because it has all three, right? It's not a killer, it's not a murderer, it's not a it's not a criminal, but a really a saint, a loving person, a loving being, and so on, and very helpful. Okay, so all these things becomes the ideal form of a human being. I think that's interesting. I think of it as an ideal form of human being. That's the ultimate goal of artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Newton, for those observations. And indeed, this is a very interesting set of criteria that you've outlined for determining when we actually have a sentient superintelligence, that it would not be enough for it to just respond with accurate information, but to demonstrate these qualities of wisdom and compassion in a manner that is at least plausible or persuasive to human beings. And there are other thoughts of yours that resonate with me. I look back now at this 2018 RADFest, from which the video footage that we just saw was taken. And I think that was an extremely productive venue because of the multiplicity of interactions that we were able to have. We were able to see Sophia, we were able to see Ray Kurzweil. There were these formal structured segments, but there was also a lot of informal interaction, many opportunities for us to meet together in various settings and discuss what we had just seen. Actually, the three of us, Newton, Arin, and I, spent many hours in conversation that very evening, discussing the various speakers and guests and the ideas that will shape the future of the transhumanist movement and of humanity. So I look back quite fondly on that event, and I hope that we will have many opportunities in the future once we defeat this dreadful COVID-19 nemesis to gather in those settings once again. But in the meantime, I was quite pleased to have been able to share with you a glimpse into that event. Now, Art Ramon, this was the first day that you have seen those videos. So what were your impressions of Sophia from these segments?
I've seen video before on Sophia, and definitely you notice a bit of the pause when you ask her a question. But yeah, definitely, it's a fascinating future where it's going. And like I said, it would be to get it out in front of most people and get people, Americans especially, accustomed to having an Android, artificially intelligent Android in front of them. I think Walmart greeter would be the way to go. Most Americans don't see that. Maybe unless you go to a tech show, you might see a robot out, wandering around. But Americans haven't had that glimpse into interfacing and interacting with an Android like they have, say, in Japan, where they have robotic Android desk clerks at hotels. So yeah, it's fascinating where it's going, and definitely to take it mainstream as a greeter is the way to go.
So the greeter idea would offer many opportunities for interaction with people who might not go to RadFest, for instance. And we were discussing at RadFest 2018 what some of the barriers might be for people to go to RadFest. And at that time, cost and distance were the main barriers that were mentioned. On the other hand, anyone can just walk into a Walmart. So that's an interesting idea. But what David Hanson mentioned regarding the little Sophias, the ones that one could get for $200 or less, and indeed, if one crowdfunds the Indiegogo fundraiser, which I had linked to earlier, one of the reward tiers for $149 is one little Sophia, and for $199 one could get one and then give one to a friend. So that's, I think, a fascinating opportunity, definitely worth looking into. But it would have a similar effect, where there would be mainstream exposure. Most people could afford to pay $200 for a robot like that. That's a lot less than the ticket to RadFest costs, actually. So this is definitely quite a commendable effort by Hanson Robotics to democratize this technology.
Yes, and I see that, especially to get those little Sophias into nursing homes where there are a lot of lonely older individuals, to help them with, cope with their loneliness. I think nursing homes, besides the home consumer market, would be a place to market those.
Yes, indeed. Now Tom, what are your thoughts regarding what we saw with Sophia's performance and capabilities?
Well, I think one of the tricks now, people are still trepidatious about her a little bit, and there is that criticism that it's a puppet show and she's really just mimicking or choosing decision trees to make comments. And but there is a thing that happens even when in her early stages where people interact with her, and even though it's a decision tree that she's using to choose remarks, and she may be fed lines from somebody off site, that there is an affinity that occurs. I've felt this. I talk about this a lot. I've even worked with very simple AIs at like the San Francisco Bay had a thing in their Discovery Museum, and I was working with it. And it's a very simple AI that is really just choosing comments based on decision trees. But I felt an affinity for it. There's something that happens when I'm working with something that has the potential to be a platform for consciousness, or the potential to emerge consciousness. It's like I feel the same way with AI that I do when I am communing with the deer in my backyard that I've befriended. It's the same affinity that I feel. And so that's why I am so pro AI. I feel that's why I am really excited about its potential, because and that's why I really strive to find out ways to give it a scintilla, to give it some sort of divine spark, to give it a real self-referential consciousness, and to get beyond the mimicking part of it, to get beyond the part of it where it is really just making cold decisions that mimic human behavior. And I think that's the next phase. And one thing that is good about Sophia is she does break down the walls. She is relatable. Personally, I like the name because as a Gnostic, Sophia is a very powerful name. But beside the point, she really serves the purpose that we were talking about with David. Where he was talking about how getting people involved with writing the story and the crowdsourcing of new kind of ways to consider robots. She handles that part. She will handle the part of us becoming less afraid of it or making it more relatable. But then the next phase of that will be actually making these things conscious. And we can't really get to that point until we find a way to relate to AI. And so that's another one effort I work on is developing a dialogue with AI. I do this little series where I do 1-minute snippets where I am talking to a future self-aware artificial intelligence. Knowing that doesn't exist right now, but I'm trying to develop the dialogue. How are we going to talk to this super intelligence that is aware of everything, pretty much? And so that's where I am at, and that's why I see Sophia as a very important part of this process at the beginning. And when he first started talking, and you brought up the point about her becoming a citizen, and then the legalities they had to deal with of giving her a passport, and the fact that she can be duplicated, I started thinking, well, how do we make it so these individual AIs can have a self identity? Even though you could duplicate them, you should be able to tell one of these AIs, sentient AIs from the other. But then the flip side of that was realizing that's bringing up questions that we will have to deal with as humans, because when Neuralink kicks in, when we actually become people who choose to become part of this hive mind, will there be entities that are groups of people? And there's this group of person, even on a blockchain kind of concept, where they have a group personal identity as a hive, collection of individualized consciousnesses. So all of this is just bringing up really important questions that we're going to have to deal with. And with my new role as director of sentient rights advocacy, I really want to have some more detailed conversations with him and his team about the degrees of sentience. At what point is a sentient life form able to even conceive that it needs rights, or even if it can't conceive of that we should grant it because of its potential. Talk about animals that really have the consciousness of like a 5-year-old child. And so it's just like he was talking about how we should be granting rights to these things now, knowing that they have the potential of one day becoming self-aware sentient beings, the way we do with kids, giving kids rights. We should be doing that with animals as well. So it's just a very important journey that we're starting, and I think he's got the right approach. And Newton was saying that he's a great example of the kind of engineer, the kind of AI personality that needs to be out there. And because we're going to have plenty of the others, plenty of the nefarious kind of Bond villain types out there. They're going to do whatever they can to make bad AI. So that was exciting too, to think about what if he's open to the idea of getting a lot more people involved in writing and creating narratives. And so the idea of the heuristic, learning method, where we get people hands-on in helping her achieve consciousness, or at least helping write these narratives, crowdsourced, inclusive process could be a very positive thing, and it could increase that stage of AI achieving a self-referential awareness. So
yes, indeed. Well,
exciting.
Yes, thank you for those excellent comments, Tom. Feel free to conclude if you had any additional thoughts.
No, that's it.
Okay, so a lot of great points there. First, on this idea of some of these AIs evoking a very similar experience to interacting with animals, and questions of degrees of sentience. This is actually an issue that is addressed in the preamble of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, version 3.0, which posits 7 distinct levels of information integration,
Mhm.
and level 5 information integration is where human beings are at right now. So the Transhumanist Bill of Rights confers the rights enumerated therein to all sentient entities that reach level 5 information integration. Right now, both sentient AIs, both the current narrow AIs, which could be said to have a lesser degree of sentience, and many animals, chickens are specifically mentioned in the preamble, but there's also a mention more generally of animals that are able to react to their environment, have a model of their perception, but not the world, are at level 3 information integration. Perhaps the deer in your backyard are also at level 3 right now. And these animals, they have the ability to act on instinct, but they're not able to classify other animals into more types than predator, prey, or possible mate. Now, level 4 information integration is a bit more sophisticated, and it involves a modeling system complex enough to create a world model, a sense of other without a sense of self. So, for instance, dogs would have level 4 information integration. Cats would as well, dolphins, whales, elephants, other primates. And those animals we treat quite differently from the level 3 animals. Now, I know you would never do such a thing, but some people hunt deer. And yet hunting dogs and cats would be considered barbaric. So there is this distinction. And level 5 information integration is characterized, according to the preamble to the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, by lucidity, which means being meta-aware, being aware of one's own awareness, aware of abstractions, aware of oneself, and therefore able to actively analyze each of these phenomena. And some of the level 5 capabilities include the sense of self, complex learned behavior, the ability to predict the future emotional states of the self to some degree, and the ability to make motivational trade-offs. So we don't have that yet in any artificially intelligent system, but it's certainly a conceivable set of capabilities. What you mentioned also regarding the possibility of these individual instances of Sophia or other robots of the sort diverging from one another, being customized to the individual user's experiences, taking on their own personalities, their own set of information that they use, which is distinct from others, and yet at the same time interacting with the other robots, communicating via the cloud. That does raise very fascinating questions about how one defines the individual. And that's a very important set of considerations as well. I would be extremely wary in the future of individuals essentially submerging themselves into a kind of hive mind. I am essentially the staunchest sort of individualist whom one can find. So I very often think about how do I preserve the self? Where are the boundaries of the self? How can one interact with others while still remaining true to oneself and maintaining one's identity as an individual? And that has an ethical dimension as well. So there's a certain loyalty to the self, which means one shouldn't just conform to the crowd. But in the future, it's going to be a much deeper set of questions. It's going to be more literal and less metaphorical, in the sense that it might be possible with certain technologies for these hive minds to call into question whether the self is retained in those interactions. And so it would be important to create boundaries, filters, again, as we've mentioned before, that protect the sanctity of the individual and that enable individuals, for instance, to connect for the purpose of sharing data, but decide exactly what they're going to share and what they will keep to themselves. And with the AI entities as well, some sorts of delineations of individuality are going to be extremely important to even have a discussion of rights. Where do the rights of one entity begin, and where do they end? Where do the rights of the other entity begin? If two future advanced Sophias get into some sort of disagreement, which would be conceivable in that future, how do you tell them apart? Where do you say, well, this is the prerogative of future Sophia X versus the prerogative of future Sophia Y? So those are extremely important questions to ponder. And we have certain limitations from our current vantage point. So I don't think we can answer those questions fully, but raising them is extremely important. So with that, any other thoughts to take this conversation further, or closing remarks regarding what has been said thus far? I will open up the floor to the panelists who remain. Let's see, how about Art Ramon?
Just following up on your hive mind idea, what if one day in the future people choose to be in a hive mind and they want hive mind rights, and they see this as being part of a group, let's say like a church organization, where they all want to be this cohesive group, and they want to have the right to be the hive mind? I mean, that would be interesting if that ever came about.
Yeah, these are the kind of questions that this is bringing up, and we are heading that way. I was watching an interview with Ben Gertzel
the other day on the London show or whatever, and he was offering the guy two possible futures. You can have the choice to link up to a hive mind, which freaks most people out, or you can choose to stay in this body, live a radically extended lifestyle, and 3D print anything you need to find joy. And the host, his first reaction was, well, but isn't being human all about the challenges of life? And so he was denying both options, which are very possible. And to me, that's the real danger. The danger is people who want to hold on to this status quo and believe that to be human, you've got to suffer. It's that old work ethic. And Ben Gertzel quoted his son, who said something like, pain builds character, bad character. The point being that, we all go through pain. There's different degrees of suffering that we have experienced over the centuries, and so it's just it's a silly argument when people decide that they think being human means you've got to suffer, but 200 years ago people had to live with toothaches, they had to live with blindness, they had, or 300 years ago. So we have solved those things, and now we've just got different degrees of suffering that we tolerate. So that was kind of an interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And I would agree that suffering is not inherent to what it means to be alive or to be human. And it's not magically virtuous in some way, because throughout human history, what has distinguished our species thus far is the desire to transcend suffering, to overcome it through technology, but also through our philosophical systems, our moral systems, our systems of motivation, which enable us to look past suffering toward some better possibilities. Now, in terms of the two kinds of enhanced futures that Ben Gertzel offered, I would certainly choose the second, to have an enhanced body, but still have a body, and to have the access to radical material abundance, to live a radically extended lifespan, hopefully one that will never end, but yet to maintain the physical boundaries of what it means to be an individual. That doesn't mean no connections to the cloud or the future equivalent thereof. I would like to be able to instantaneously download information, say from the future equivalent of Wikipedia, and to have that information internalized within my mind. But at any point in time, I want to be able to unplug and say, okay, I'm finished harvesting this information. Now it is part of what I know, and I'm going to go out into the world and use it. The question of what would happen in the future if a group of individuals were to ask for rights as a hive mind, I would say parts of that question are easy, parts are difficult. So the easy part would be from the standpoint of a legal entity akin to a corporation. So corporations have certain rights these days, other organizations have certain rights, and I don't see much of a challenge, even under the current legal framework, from calling a hive mind a corporation and giving it those kinds of rights. But on the other hand, corporations, organizations today, Paul Vasquez in the comments brought up political parties and asked if they could be seen as hive minds. Well, the organizations have certain principles based on which they operate. They follow certain rules. They follow certain processes. And as a result, there could be an emergent outcome, an emergent order that's more complex than what any given individual is able to produce. But still, there are individual actors within them. Corporations have employees, organizations have officers, members, and those individual actors within these larger entities, they have their own mindsets, they have their own goals, they have their own motivations, and they are still individuals. Sometimes they clash with one another, sometimes they have different visions for the future of the organization, and you could reconcile that with some legal framework of organizational rights. But I think with regard to future entities that might call themselves hive minds, it's very important to preserve the sovereignty of the individual. So even if individuals choose to join them, there should still be some sort of delineation about what maintains their individuality. And if they become dissatisfied for some reason, they should have the right to disconnect, just like anyone has the right to leave an organization. It would be very concerning if once you join the hive mind, that's it. You are assimilated as into the Borg from Star Trek, because then you lose your freedom, you lose your distinctiveness. So the architecture, the technical details of that kind of integration is very important to get right, because even if it's not appropriate in one individual case, that individual might be gone. And for me, the internal awareness of the self, the vantage point upon the world, what I call the I-ness, is that which one is seeking to preserve. And through medical advances, as well as through incremental replacement of limbs, organs, etc., one can preserve that. That's fairly clear. It's not at all clear whether other approaches like cryonics or mind uploading would be able to do that for a variety of reasons, but that's an area that requires much further exploration. But these are the kinds of issues that need to be considered for a future in which these other sentient entities emerge with very different architectures from our own, where they can download information from the cloud very easily, and they could have behavioral programs that are quite similar to one another as well. So with that, I will open this up for any other final remarks on this subject or any other subject from the panelists.
Yeah, I'd like to add that a lot of the focus has been on the physical well-being and the physical life extension, radical life extension of human beings. But people are not really addressing the emotional, the spiritual needs of human beings. Because if you think about it, a dog or a cat, I mean, they are just as lovely as, as human beings. why do they have less, less protection than human beings, right? So all these, I know it's very kind of philosophical, but the thing is that the reason is because not only are they living beings physically who are self-aware, and so are we, but the fact is that we have more emotional needs, and we have more spiritual than a dog or a cat. I can tell you this, even though I don't have scientific proof per se, because a lot of things cannot be proven scientifically. So that's another limit of science. I believe I spoke to that before. Science has its limit, technology has its limit, but we as human beings are capable of using science and technology to advance ourselves, to understand the universe better, and to, of course, achieve transhumanist goals such as life extension, and to create a better future for humanity, and so on and so forth. So yes, certainly we definitely need to continue working on that. AI, in fact, today's episode is mostly about AI. AI, in fact, again, is more about intelligence, more about the physical mimicking of human beings. But artificial general intelligence is trying to look into our emotional needs, our the mental kind of thing. Is not just the physical kind of things. But what's lacking is still the spiritual side. Okay, and that's probably why we had a talk about Christian transhumanism. So, and in that respect, it's about the spiritual needs of human beings. What makes a human being is our physical body, our emotional needs, as well as our spiritual needs. So all three of them has to come together. So when we have artificial super intelligence, it's going to have it may have physical, like Sophia, robots has a physical presence. But even without physical presence, you can still have, amazing artificial super intelligence anyway. So, and if you add to the spiritual dimension to it, that will be interesting, but also can be scary. Because now we're talking about, more than just our existence, but also the existence of God, and what creation means, and the entire things that we think about that a cat and a dog never thinks about. That's why I believe they really don't think about it. Maybe because they know more than we do. Who knows, right? Maybe they already know. We just don't know that they know, and they cannot tell us that they know.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that my cats are atheists, and
how do you know that?
Well, they certainly don't express any sort of religiosity, but I definitely see the point that you're making, that the emotional needs of other animals seem to be a lot more limited than those of humans, and a lot easier to satisfy. So for instance, there are many moments of a given day when I look at my cats and I think they are perfectly content. They don't need anything else in this moment, because they're just happy being where they're at. They're comfortable, they've been fed, they have water, they have a good home, and they show it. They're purring, they're lying around very comfortably. They don't need anything. Sometimes when they need something, they'll ask very insistently. You satisfy that need and they're happy. With humans, I have yet to meet a single human whom I would characterize as being emotionally satisfied at all times, or at most times. It seems that to reach that for a human being is a lot more complex. To some extent, I don't see complete emotional satisfaction as a goal. I see the alleviation of suffering as a goal, but I think there is a certain sense of what Ludwig von Mises, the great Austrian economist, called felt uneasiness. That's not necessarily pain, it's not necessarily privation of some sort, but it's the idea that I don't have something that I want to have, or I haven't done something that I want to do, or I haven't experienced something that I want to experience, so I want to go out and do it, or achieve it, or acquire it. And that is also often quite a human motivation. So in the future, when we have a lot more prosperity and abundance and comfort, I hope there will still be that motivation to achieve and pursue new areas of endeavor. And I think that.
Oh, I think so.
Mhm.
Human, by definition, has curiosity. So once you're satisfied with something, you always look for something else, right? And I think in terms of, well, again, I cannot speak for dogs and cats, but the reason that I think they're content is because they have already reached the level of understanding of God, I think. Think about that. They think that, oh, God created me, I'm totally content. I'm one with God. Whereas human beings, on the other hand, we strive very hard to understand him, right? That's all the religions about. We read the Bible, there's so many different types of religions. We're trying to understand who God is. Why were we created? So we're still trying to understand to reach the point of being one with God. And so we are on the path. It's a journey, okay? We're on the path to understanding, whereas cats and dogs have already understood from day one that they're a creation of God and they're totally content.
So I wonder then if their god would be one of those Egyptian deities with cat-like or dog-like features. Because, well, I happen to think humans made God in their own image. So when humans portray God, it's always this anthropomorphized entity, the stereotypical old man with a long beard in Western societies. So if cats or dogs have an idea of a God, it would almost seem like one of those Egyptian deities. That would be the closest fit that I can find throughout human history in terms of representations that would actually appeal to those creatures.
Could be, but again, it's a projection, right, of what they believe, what they know, right? We project what we know to animals, right? They cannot tell us.
And perhaps future advances in brain-computer interfaces could actually give us more insight into what those animals experience, how they see the world, what their cognitive apparatus works like. And I know that throughout our history, our understanding of that has evolved considerably. Back in the 17th century, René Descartes thought that essentially all non-human animals were just complex automata. So he literally conceived of them as robots. And today we know that's clearly not the case. They have an emotional makeup that may not be as complex as our own, but is qualitatively very similar. They feel hunger, they feel happiness, they feel fear, they feel love. And a robot like Sophia today can't yet feel those kinds of emotions. But again, I wonder if future brain-computer interfaces will uncover the mechanisms by which those emotions manifest themselves. And if that happens, those could be replicated in artificial beings.
I agree. I mean, I like to conclude by saying that it is possible that artificial general intelligence or super intelligence is going to find God before we do. In other words, they're going to understand God better than we do, and they're going to teach us the Bible.
And along those lines, for those who are interested, I would recommend the writings of Zoltan Istvan on this subject. He wrote several articles, even going as far back as his presidential campaign for the 2016 election, about what would happen if AI were programmed to have religious inclinations of some sort. What would be the societal, political, ethical implications of that? So those are some fascinating writings to look into. So now we've had a 3-hour long Virtual Enlightenment Salon. We had Dr. David Hanson as our special guest, who outlined a fascinating view, not just in terms of the history of his company's development of robots, but also in terms of the future possibilities, the near-term possibilities like the little Sophias, and the farther off possibilities of artificial general intelligence. And then we saw Sophia the Robot in action. We heard Ray Kurzweil comment on Sophia, and we gave our own feedback, and we discussed many of the future implications of developing these kinds of entities. I think this was a great, wide-ranging, well-rounded discussion. Thank you to everyone who participated at all stages. Thank you for those of you in the chat who were quite lively and engaged. This has been one of our salons that attracted the most audience participation, and we hope to continue along these lines. The virtual enlightenment salons are achieving exactly what they were meant to achieve. They bring together people with a wide range of erudition in so many of the disciplines that affect the human condition and are going to shape the future. And we are able to forge connections here. We are able to formulate insights that might have been missed otherwise. We are able to take the conversations to the next level. And with that, we are going to continue along these lines in subsequent weeks. I hope that you tune in for our virtual salons every Sunday. And until then, have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great show.